saw the video of that mom who put her little like 1.5-year-old into the corner, and I want to talk about it. I want to share what I would have done differently. I want to share why this happened. I want to give you some tips if you're struggling with a little one who's doing things like hitting and biting, which is normal and pretty much every toddler in the world will do at some point. The first thing I want to say before we talk about like disciplining this sort of behavior is that I'm not shaming this mom at all, right? Because all of us are parenting from what we learned. We're parenting from our subconscious brain. We're parenting from our own triggers. We're parenting from our own childhood and what was modeled to us and the emotional regulation skills we have and the discipline methods that we saw growing up, which is why I think it is literally the most important thing you can do as a parent, to go out of your way to learn new skills, to notice your triggers, to be aware of how you were parented and how your caregivers acted and how discipline looked when you were little, how feelings were handled when you were little, because that is literally the blueprint with which your brain is acting when you have little kids. If you grew up in a house where certain behaviors were not tolerated, where the discipline method was timeout, isolation, go to a corner, get a spanking, then that's naturally what your reaction is going to be, especially when you are triggered when something happens like being hit or bit or kicked or your hair pulled or whatever that happens when you have toddlers. So that's the first piece. That's a huge thing I talk about here. Next is just rethinking what's happening here and how we handle it in the first place. When a toddler is hitting, when they're doing any sort of physical tricky behavior like this, hitting, biting, anything like that, we need to go into it with the mindset of they're dysregulated, they're no longer making logical choices. Toddlers don't make logical choices anyways because that's not how their brain is developed, but they're in an emotional state. They're dysregulated and their body is reacting in the only way they know how. This is when I always come back to my framework that I teach my students, which is prep, in the moment, and teach. So in the moment and teach, which is really like setting boundaries and setting consequences, we're so calm. I would be blocking their hand, right? I would be gently holding their hands down. I would be giving them that boundary of like, hey, I see you're upset. You can't hit me. No, thank you. And blocking their hand, that's all they need in that moment, right? You are allowed to set boundaries around being hit or being bitten or being your hair pulled or whatever. Sometimes that even looks like, hey, I'm going to set you down for a minute because I don't want you to do that, right? And then co-regulating, but you're coming in with that calm energy and you're setting that boundary. And then the other part of my framework that's actually the most important when it comes to this is remembering, like, how do toddlers actually learn lessons so they don't hit next time? When a toddler is dysregulated, a 1-year-old or a 5-year-old or anywhere in between, I say toddler, but like any of those ages, they do not learn lessons because when they're dysregulated, their brain is in a survival state. It's literally in a state of alert, I need to survive. So when this mom is putting her little toddler in the corner, he's not over there telling himself and learning like, hey, when I hit, that's bad, I shouldn't do that anymore. He's literally shutting down his nervous system and his feelings so he can go back in connection with his mom. That's why things like timeout, putting him in a corner, spanking, punishment like that doesn't actually work because your toddler is not learning anything. They literally can't in that moment. They need to co-regulate with you. And then in calm moments, they need to start to learn the skills that will help them not hit next time, which is the whole prep piece of my framework. It's asking yourself this question of like, why is my toddler hitting? Were they frustrated? Were they upset? Did they need connection? Were they just excited and they don't know how to handle it? Those are all options. And in that prep part of my framework, I literally take you through like how to figure out why your toddler is doing what they're doing, because that's how you shift it, right? That's how you actually teach them a lesson of like, hey, whacking mom in the face is not okay. Here's the skills you need. Maybe that little toddler was frustrated about something and he needed some more opportunities to start to learn frustration tolerance. Maybe he needed to start to learn emotional regulation because he was sad. And so that's why he was hitting mom, because she had set a boundary. Like, those are skills that you can teach. You can use songs, you can use games, you can use little limericks, you can read picture books. Like, that's all stuff that I'm doing daily with my 16-month-old and that I think this mom could really benefit from, because that's what's actually going to teach him the skills he needs to not hit the next time those big emotions come up. I think the two things that really you can ask yourself consistently when it comes to tricky behaviors from your toddler is, one, am I reacting from a calm place or am I triggered right now? And I'm reacting from my own emotions, my own childhood, my own upbringing. And two, what can I do that's actually going to help my toddler make a different choice next time? What do they need to learn? What do they need to see? What alternate behavior do they need to be modeled so that next time this doesn't come up again? because that's what's actually going to stop it from happening consistently over time. That can absolutely be done with setting boundaries and setting limits, but in a respectful and loving and caring way.